Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting Great British Road Journey. This week we are again in Cambridgeshire, and today we'll be undertaking a journey from Wisbech to Ely, which hopefully involves fewer punts than our journey to Cambridgeshire last week. Yep, same joke. As always, to help navigate our way there, we'll be using a copy of my 1923 Michelin guidebook, period correct maps, and stopping to look at whatever I skim read on Wikipedia. We start then in Wisbech. Back in the old days, Cambridgeshire's second largest town, losing out only to Cambridge itself. Today it's third on the list, but only because in more recent times Peterborough became part of Cambridgeshire. In the days of my guidebook, however, Peterborough was nothing to do with Cambridgeshire, much to their delight, so it won't be part of the Cambridgeshire episodes, even though it's in Cambridgeshire. Punts? Despite Wisbech being one of the larger towns in the county, it is perhaps one of the most poorly connected, having had most of its useful transport links removed over the years. Where today we find Churchill Road running through the middle of Wisbech, in 1923 we'd have found the recently closed Wisbech Canal, which ran from Wisbech to Upwell. The canal opened in 1797, and because we're in the Fens, a particularly low area of land, the canal was built mostly along an embankment with floodlocks at either end. In 1834, following a massive storm, these would fail and extensive flooding would occur. The canal would close in 1922 because a rival company would set up a tramway which followed along the same route. Interestingly, whilst it was called a tramway, it was actually a full-size railway that utilised smaller steam tram locomotives like Toby, and it was better in almost every way, so the canal lost most of its trade and sat abandoned until the 1970s, at which point it was tarmacked over. The tramway would close in the mid-1960s along with all of other Wisbech's railways. At one point there were 3 passenger lines and 4 railway stations, along with a host of industrial railways scattered around Wisbech, but today it's all gone. Best jump in the car then, as no one wants to get the bus, and we'll be heading out to Wisbech via the B198. This used to be the A47 until Wisbech was bypassed, but just on the south side of Wisbech we get to a roundabout where we'll be picking up the A47 as per our old maps, allowing for a fairly straightforward route to our next destination, which is the tiny village of Ringsend, where we find an abandoned railway viaduct. It used to be part of the Northern and Eastern Joint Railway and the Spalding to March branch line. The viaduct remained operational and was still seeing trains up until 1982, but Guyherne Station, which sat next door, was closed in the mid-1960s. More abandoned things next, and just before we arrive in March, there's an abandoned road to be found. It used to be the main road into March, numbered as the A141, and it would cross over the railway via a level crossing. However, in more recent times, the road has been realigned and a bridge built, I assume because the road and crossing exceeded its traffic capacity. Further changes would occur nearby with the construction of the Pease Hill roundabout, where you can find some small sections of the original road still left over, now used as access. My guidebook suggests that we take a visit to see March's parish church, but meh. Instead, I thought we'd talk about March's most well-known landmark, Whitemoor Prison. In the UK, prisons are designated with different categories from A to D, depending on the type of crime, risk of escape and violent tendencies. A prison with a category A can be regarded as the highest risk, housing the most high-profile clientele, and indeed Whitemoor Prison in March is a category A prison. They're not interested in petty criminals at Whitemoor. You need to be serving a minimum 4-year sentence to get through the door, and it's one of 8 high-security prisons around England. Notable residents include serial killer Dennis Nilsson and IRA member and convicted murderer Paul McGee. To get out of March, we're going to cross the River Nen, or Nene, whatever you like, via what at the time was the only bridge over the river in the town. The road, today called Broad Street, used to be the A141, but a bypass was built along with the second bridge crossing, which today takes the A141 road number. We'll be following the B1101, aka the old A141, which takes us into Wimbledon. Where not a lot happens, but situated not in the village but in the parish of Wimbledon, is Stony Camp, an Iron Age hill fort that has a very unique feature. It's the lowest hill fort in the country at a massive 2 metres above sea level, otherwise known as a fort. It dates back to possibly around 500 BC. At the time, it would have offered a bit of a safe haven because the surrounding land would regularly flood, and the earthworks that we see today are the remains of a ditch and bank system used to keep the water out. Just up the road from Stony Camp is some more gratuitous railway content, but this is funny. Stony Level Crossing can perhaps take the title of most twatted bridge in England. Despite being a level crossing, it does indeed have a bridge which allows the road to bypass the level crossing by going underneath the railway. The choice is yours, underpass or level crossing. crossing, and it would seem with most opting to use the underpass, it's led to a high number of incidents where vehicles have collided with the 6.5-foot high bridge. Not only that, and perhaps less funny, is that traffic merges back onto the road without looking, which has led to more accidents, and with people living alongside the road as well, it's a complete shit show that nobody wants to fix. Network Rail say that because the crossing is a manually operated gate crossing, it would be unsafe to close the underpass. The local council didn't see the problem, but after a few expensive studies, put out a few more road signs. Getting back on track, and our route takes us through Chatteris, where my guidebook suggests we may want to take a look at Manor Farm. How exciting! Do we get to meet the animals? No, because things have changed a bit since the days of my guidebook. Gone is Manor Farm, and in its place lies the original manor house, but instead of a farm, we've now got Wenny Road Meadow, a meadow on Wenny Road. It's a lovely patch of nature, home to a variety of birds, bats and reptiles, and has become a very popular location with local residents who use the space for recreation. It's the perfect spot for 100 characterless new build houses for which planning permission was approved in 2023, so enjoy it whilst it lasts, and we can probably cross out Manor Farm from my guidebook. Onward we go, and heading out of Chatteris requires the A142, which has a fantastic near-perfect straight bit of road, or it did until some dickhead added a roundabout. After that we passed by an abandoned activity centre and old quarry on our way to Meepal, where we, well, hang on a minute, abandoned what now? Yeah, built in the 1980s on an old quarry or gravel pit alongside the A142 is where we'd have found Meepal Outdoor Activity Centre, a place where schools would visit or families on the weekend for such fun activities like rock climbing, sailboating and archery and mad raves with pills. Wait, what? Sorry, that came later. In 2016, the site would fall victim to an arson attack or convenient end to a place that was costing its owners an absolute fortune to run, and with funds not available to repair it, it was closed down permanently. It was reported that on Christmas Day in 2018, the activity centre would hold an unauthorised musical gathering between a small bunch of locals. Details are unclear because nobody can really remember much, but the collective opinion was that it was a really good night. The police, on the other hand, somewhat disagreed, but it didn't stop another musical gathering occurring at the activity centre 2 days later. By 2021, the site was and the council demolished what was left of it, and the latest idea is to build a cemetery on the site for several £1 million. What are they going to do, chuck all the bodies in the lake? Next up is another demolished structure, because of which we're forced onto a 1985 built section of the A142, so we're not able to follow our route as per the old maps and guidebook. What was supposed to happen is that we'd cross over the River Dell via Old Bedford Bridge, which would take us directly into the village of Meepal. But the 1980s A142 required a new bridge to be built and the old one removed, as well as a small section of the original road, which is now just a line of trees. So we're bypassing Meepal then, but that's okay. It must be a dull place because it doesn't even get a mention in my guidebook. The most interesting feature of Meepal is found just outside the village, where we find the former RAF Meepal. This was very much a product of the second small disagreement, having been banged out over a couple of weekends during 1942, with the airfield opening shortly after in 1943. Apparently, 75 Squadron, a squadron of Lancaster bombers who were based at the airfield, flew the highest number of missions out of any RAF bomber squadron, totalling 8,000 missions. As we moved into the third disagreement, now upgraded from small to medium, in the 1950s the United States would install some of their lovely ballistic missiles right next to the village of Meepal. Designed to destroy whatever the hell they wanted, mostly Russia, these missiles could carry nuclear warheads and only suffered from a 24% launch failure rate, but I don't think that really would have mattered, you'd be dead. Back in the car now for the final leg of the journey as we head towards Ely. We pass through Witchford on Main Street because it's the correct thing to do according to our old maps, and we will indeed pass through since my guidebook doesn't acknowledge Witchford, and instead, before we get to Ely, we're going to make a quick stop to look at Ely Water Tower on Tower Road. In the days of my guidebook, we'd have been looking at a very different structure, one of, dare I say, elegance. The original structure was built in 1853 using over 600,000 bricks, organic and locally sourced, of course. The nice water tower would last up until 1939, at which point it was replaced with the less exciting yet functional water tower that we see today. Oh my God, it's the most beautiful thing. We arrive in Ely a short distance away from the water tower, which since the days of my guidebook has certainly expanded, more than doubling its population in the last 100 years. Throughout that time, and indeed since the year 1083, Ely Cathedral has towered over the town, and it's a point of interest that my guidebook suggests we take a look at. And look at it we will. It's an incredible structure that attracts over 250,000 visitors a year, and I can see why. It's made out of stone dug out of Northamptonshire, supplies that were paid for not with cash or money, but with eels. Yeah, you heard correctly. correctly, it was agreed that Taylor Wimpey, or whoever was building the cathedral, would pay for their building supplies with eels. Which leads me nicely onto Ely Eel Day, something that I promised my mum I'd include in the video because she seemed to know all about it. Hi mum, I'm on the interwebs, are you wondering how I got into your computer? Anyway, it turns out that Ely is called Ely because of eels. You wouldn't believe it, but it seems to be true because many years ago the surrounding area was mostly water, with Ely being considered more of an island, and as a result there was a steady supply of eels. I always thought, perhaps stereotypically, that eels were a bit of an East London thing, but apparently not. They love their eels in Ely, and it was one of, if not the main supplier of eels. Anyway, Ely Eel Day is an annual event that celebrates Ely's connection with eels. Highlights include a parade that kicks off right here at Ely Cathedral and an eel throwing competition. Don't worry, they use imitation eels. The event has been held on and off since 2004 and it's the perfect example of the English doing English things. We are such idiots. And there we are then guys, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that. And if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That'd be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, you've been watching Auto Shenanigans and I'll see you guys next time for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Until then, take care, bye bye.